Colby Covington versus Belal Muhammad, Michael Chiesa versus Li Jingliang, and also Vera versus Sandhagen has been postponed until the main event of UFC Fight Night San Antonio in March. It was originally on the main event of an Apex card in February, but now the new main event is Santos versus Blanchfield. I'm going to talk about all of this and more in today's MMA news reaction video. Let's start straight away with the story that's been coming out about Colby Covington versus Belal Muhammad being targeted by the UFC. Full Violence posted about this. The Schmo did an interview where Ali Abdelaziz was saying something like, you know, they were working on this to be on Tough, but now I guess they've got Conor McGregor, so they're not going to do it for Tough anymore. But it does mean that maybe they were targeting for this matchup in the welterweight division. And people are saying stuff like, there's a 302 liked comment here that says, Colby takes the easiest fights, bruh. Belal Muhammad is not an easy fight. It's just a fact. It's just not a fight. It's not an easy fight whatsoever. Belal Muhammad just beat Wonderboy, Vicente Luque, and Sean Brady back to back to back. And also, if the UFC wants to make Khamzat Chimaev versus Colby Covington, the fact that they're now maybe talking about this being in the works, either it's one big Ali Abdelaziz lie, or Khamzat Chimaev's moving up to middleweight, and the reason why they've left Whittaker out to dry recently and haven't really came up with a matchup for him is maybe because they didn't know where Chimaev was going to go next. Can he actually make welterweight? Is he going to be moving up? And maybe soon we'll be hearing news about Khamzat Chimaev versus Robert Whittaker, so we'll see how it goes. This is massive, massive news, though. A massive matchup in the welterweight division. I'm not sure who would win this, to be honest with you. I'm really not sure, because the inactivity of Colby Covington is going to be a real worry here, because Belal Muhammad has been full steam ahead. Hunger mode. He has not, got what he needs yet out of his career. Colby Covington has, and he's about to get a whole lot more money out of the Jorge Masvidal lawsuit as well. So it's very weird. It's very weird, and people are saying Colby's the CEO of cherry picking. This is a no-win matchup for Covington. No-win matchup for Covington. He should rather fight Khamzat Chimaev, because then at least if he wins, you'll actually get some respect from it. If he loses, people are going to say Colby was always trash. He's washed up. How did you let Belal Muhammad beat you? Because people are really against acknowledging that Belal Muhammad is a top-level welterweight. I don't know why. I picked him to beat Vicente Luque. I picked him to beat other opponents recently as well. I didn't pick him to beat Sean Brady, but he proved me wrong there as well. He's a very good welterweight. An extremely good welterweight. And I think this is a dangerous matchup for Covington. And I might lean towards Belal Muhammad. Here. He's got solid takedown defense. Really good cardio. Recently, he's gained a whole bunch of muscle mass out of nowhere in his career. He's a big guy for the welterweight division. I think he can give Colby some problems. I know Colby's been working on some stuff defensively on his feet. Off of the back foot. We saw that against Usman. But the shots were few and far between, and it wasn't a very high-paced fight. I feel like if Belal Muhammad immediately puts Covington on his back heels early on, it's worrying. If he puts him on his heels early on in this fight, I meant to say, not his back heels, back foot heels, you know what I mean? If he backs him up early on in this matchup, and maybe, who knows, shoots some takedowns on Covington and tries to get the back, I reckon there could be some problems for Colby here, who has been absolutely inactive. And Belal's been on a streak. I'm just going to check the recent matchups of the two of them. But Belal Muhammad has been full steam ahead recently in his career, taking no time off, getting back in there every time. I mean, look at him on his Tapology picture compared to the shape he's in now. The dude's definitely learned how to get in shape somehow in the middle of his career. And his performances have changed after that. Don't know what it could possibly be. Who knows? Anyway, Sean Brady... That was in October of 2022. April, beat Vicente Luque. Wonderboy was in December of 2021. Damian Maia was in June before that. But these are dangerous guys that he's been going through. And I know that not a lot of them have the wrestling background of Colby Covington. But Sean Brady's a hell of a grappler for the division. Maybe not the same level of grappler as Covington is. But Belal shut him down. Every single takedown he went for. And Brady did out-grapple Michael Chiesa in their fight. You know, who has proven he can out-grapple guys like RDA the same way Covington can. And, you know, take down and run a grappling clinic on Neil Magny in that division, which shouldn't be impressive, but somehow it is, because Neil Magny somehow beat guys like Jeff Neal and stuff like that. So I'm leaning towards Belal here based on the inactivity of Colby Covington. You know, he's not going to have been in there since March of 2022. The fight will probably take place in April or May, earliest. Let's be real. I reckon they'll put it on a pay-per-view card. So we're saying, what, May is when we're going to be looking at this matchup? That's, what, 14 months out for Colby Covington. And he's not young. He's 34 years of age. You know, I'm leaning towards Belal Muhammad here, sad as it is. If this was an active Covington that was like after the Masvidal win, he turned right back around a couple of months later, fought Belal Muhammad, maybe I'd think otherwise, but I'm going to go with Belal Muhammad. I think he's been counted out for too long and he's really on some shit right now in many ways. We move on to another story that's come up. But by the way, no, we don't move on. Khamzat Chimaev. This means middleweight for him. 100% it does. The fact that if Ali Abdelaziz is not lying and just trying to get Belal Muhammad into a position where they were actually considering this and get Belal Muhammad's name in the headlines, if this story is true and they were considering this, and I know Belal Muhammad even mentioned that they were like talking about him versus Covington for tough, and you know Gilbert Burns was talking about, you know, me or Belal, what would be better, and there was that conversation going on. So I doubt they're completely lying about this. I'm sure the UFC have reached out to them to make a top level welterweight matchup between some of those names. So I don't think this is a lie. What's Khamzat Chimaev doing? I feel like he would have fought by now if he was gonna. He ain't been in there for a while. Listen, Khamzat Chimaev was a guy who, his career was built on the fact that he was going to be incredibly active, was it not? That was his whole point of his career. Like, I'm going to be incredibly active. I'm going to fight non-stop. I'm going to do this and jump between 2 different weight divisions. And, you know, last fought in September and we ain't heard nothing yet. And it's February of the next year. And before that September fight, he hadn't fought since April. You know, like I'm not saying he's being inactive. I mean, he's being active compared to the Colby Covingtons of the world, but, you know, not incredibly. I thought we'd be hearing some news by now, so the fact that we're hearing some radio silence from Khamzat Chimaev, who I have no idea what he's doing with his life right now, because it seems like nothing to do with fighting, as far as I'm concerned. Just going to look him up on Instagram, see what's going on his Instagram page. He's showing pictures of him training. He doesn't look like he's heavy. He looks like he's like slimming down and stuff like that and trimming down his weight and trying to get lean. So maybe there will be a welterweight matchup, but man, I don't know. They might be moving on. And if they're moving on, looking like it's going to be Khamzat Chimaev, Robert Whittaker, whether he wants it or not. Or anyone at middleweight. Paulo Costa, Jared Cannonier. I don't know, I just feel like I've got invested in seeing him versus these top-level welterweights for so long. I want him to commit to it. You've made weight before. Make it again, you sped. Like and subscribe. No, move on to another story. Michael Chiesa versus Li Jingliang. A massive, massive matchup. UFC 287, April the 8th. This is a big deal, and I feel like Michael Chiesa can win this one, to be honest with you. A lot of people are massive fans of Li Jingliang recently, so people are saying, you know, you this and that, and, you know, this is a tough one. You know, Li Jingliang, I'm rooting for Li. I feel like Michael Chiesa can get this one in the bag. I think that's what Michael Chiesa's been waiting for. I know he's been injured, but I think Michael Chiesa's in a point of his career right now where he works for the UFC, but he realizes that if he no longer fights for the UFC, he's going to become irrelevant and he'll probably lose his job in the UFC. You know what I mean? Working on the desk, having his show with Paul Felder. I feel like Michael Chiesa, you know, if he stops fighting, he's going to lose his job. I feel like Dominic Cruz feels like that a little bit recently as well. Like, they know that if they stay on the roster and they say, oh, I'll be there in 9 months, you know, I'll be fighting soon. Next year, I'll take a fight. It kind of buys them another year of working the broadcasting team for the UFC. So I think Michael Chiesa's playing that game right now. I don't think he has title aspirations. Maybe if he wins this one impressively, he'll start reconsidering because, you know, he does have some decent wins in that division. And if he wins this one, he can start looking for a top 10 opponent. I think he does win this. Are we forgetting about Li Jingliang's takedown defense? Is that what we're doing here? Because Li Jingliang's takedown defense is interesting. to say the least. So I will be going with Michael Chiesa here. I'll definitely be going with Michael Chiesa. Li Jingliang's dangerous. He's definitely improved his takedown defense, or attempted to. But he's still 34. He's not going to make those night and day differences in such a weakness in his game in that short of time. You know? And he did beat Muslim Salikov, but Salikov, for a Dagestani guy, is a bit more of a striker. Throws wheel kicks and stuff, not known for the takedowns. And we've just seen it a lot in his fights. Khamzat Chimaev completely steamrolled him. Neil Magny was able to outgrapple him in their fight, and we saw what Chiesa can do to a guy like Neil Magny. So I'm not going to trust him. You know, we've seen him outgrappled before by Jake Matthews. Matthews was able to spend a long time on top of him in their fight. Nakamura choked him out before. He's had this history of losing the same way to the same kind of style. And Chiesa, what we saw against Luque, I know he eventually made a mistake and fell into Luque's dash choke, which is like his signature move. But what we saw on the feet from him, he tagged Luque on the feet. Like, he wasn't in until he was like in the danger zone. You know what I mean? He wasn't just lingering in the pocket like Ben Askren, throwing out arm punches, ready to be taken advantage of on the feet. He was like bouncing around, a bunch of movement, not staying stationary whatsoever, being awkward, switching stances. Like, he's a bit more tricky on the feet to deal with. So I don't see Li Jingliang just lighting him up and KOing him in the first round. So if they end up on the ground, I'm taking Michael Chiesa to win this one by submission. So I will be leaning towards Chiesa. And as I said, I think Chiesa's in a position right now where he's just kind of been waiting for a good matchup. And he's found himself a good matchup. Ranked opponent, top 15. If he wins, he can look towards the top 10. You know, I bet you if he wins this one, he'll be calling out names like Stephen Thompson. That's all I'm going to say. Hey, Stephen Thompson, me versus you. Maybe you'll want a rematch against Sean Brady if Brady wins or loses upcoming soon. Like, he'll want those types of matchups. So that's what I can see him going for. But yeah, I think he wins this and calls out Wonderboy, which he may or may not get. I'm not sure, but I think he's been looking at the division and he sees Li Jingliang as like that's a style I can beat with my heavy grappling. Because let's not forget, like, he did out-grapple RDA really easily. Like, he won that fight. RDA is no joke in that welterweight division. And I'd say he out-grappled RDA as effectively as Colby Covington did. Because Covington weren't really controlling him too much. He was just getting takedowns and, you know, running that pressure game on RDA. But Chiesa did the same thing. I know it was in a 3-rounder and RDA eventually looked good in the 3rd round, but in a 3-rounder here against Li Jingliang, I don't see why you can't make Li Jingliang look quite bad in the grappling department. So I'm going to go with Michael Chiesa, 2nd round submission. I reckon he gets it done. We move on. And that's also on the UFC 287 card, which is now looking amazing. Pereira Adesanya 2, Burns versus Masvidal, Font versus Yanez, Michelle Waterson's on the card, Kelvin Gastelum, Chris Curtis, Kevin Holland, Santiago Ponzinibbio, Bahamondes Motta, Raul Rosas Jr. is coming back against Rodriguez, Calvillo Godinez, Meerschaert Piper. Now Chiesa versus Li Jingliang is also on the prelims. This card is absolutely amazing. We move on to more news, which was, I can't remember what it was. Vera versus Sandhagen has been postponed to the main event of UFC Fight Night San Antonio, which is really good news because it deserves a live crowd, and we were hearing rumours that Pennington versus Aldana was going to be the main event, and that would have made me very, very annoyed at the UFC. Extremely annoyed. That would have really annoyed me, is all I'm going to say. I love this. I love that it's going to get a crowd. I love the card in general because now the card's looking really good. There were way too many female fights before for it to be a good card because, you know, they're always shit. And now Pennington Aldana is a rumoured co-main event for the card. So maybe it'll still happen but just won't be on the card. But now we've got Vera Sandhagen, Pennington versus Aldana, Lee versus Barber, Nujkwani Duraev, Holm versus Kunitskaya, Brady versus Pereira. That's a great matchup. Perez Cap, Caceres versus Landwehr. Come on. These are sick fights on the card. So looking forward to that fight night card. Great for UFC San Antonio. I don't think this changes the fight in any way, so I'm not going to talk about that talk about the fight in that regard. I feel like Sandhagen's still going to win. Yeah, I just think more of a training camp is better for Sandhagen anyway because he's more of a game planner out of the two of them. Vera's going to show up and fight regardless, whereas Sandhagen You know, he did have a tough fight with Song Yadong recently, so a little bit of extra time off might be better for him in terms of the toughness that he's going to have going into the fight, because he does need to trust in his chin in this matchup. So I still think Sandhagen's going to win. The problem this is, though, is that we've abandoned ship on February, I feel like. Anyone else? Like, the UFC just said, forget about February, then we'll move on. Like, we got the pay-per-view coming up next weekend, which is really good. Makhachev Volkanovski. Amazing. Not the best of pay-per-views in terms of how stacked it is, let's be real. If it had Whittaker versus Costa on there, it would have been 10 times better. But, you know, without Whittaker versus Costa, that pay-per-view's been left out to dry. We got a fat Justin Tuffer on the main card of a pay-per-view. That's a disgrace. But the main events in February are now Lewis versus Spivak, Santos Blanchfield, and Krylov versus Spann. And it's just getting a bit annoying, because that Santos Blanchfield card, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 fights on the card, which is alright. It's enough fights for a card. But what of substance is there on that card? I don't mind Santos Blanchfield being a main event. I really don't. Just give us great fights on the card underneath it. You know? Give us something underneath the card. Not, oh, well, at least the co-main event's Jim Miller versus Gabriel Benitez. I need more than that. I'm sick of these cards that are just like, well, we know they'll watch it anyway, so let's put any old thing on. No, give us some substance every card. And I love the pay-per-views in March, but hey, I could lose a solid fight off the prelims of one of these pay-per-views and have it be the co-main event of that card. You know, February 18th is Santos versus Blanchfield. The Jones versus Garn prelims have, I mean, maybe they don't have much to spare. They have Ian Gary versus Kenan Song. Jarlin Turner Dan Hooker is on the prelims of UFC 285. Make it the co-main event of that fight night card. The main event, even, would be better. You know what I mean? I feel like they're just, maybe, you know, we just got to look forward to March. That's what we got to do. Forget about February. Abandon ship. It's in the past. Look forward to March and onwards. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle Pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.